What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. It is Wednesday, March 6, 2019, middle of the weekday, hump day, start of that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday, and another interesting weekend here. So we've got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, observations, and opinions. So let's just get right on into it. In the category of it was too good to be true, apparently less than 24 hours after Hillary Clinton was on camera, on news, saying that she was not going to run for president in 2020, now she's waffling back on and apparently saying that she was surprised her announcement was taken at face value. Well, I mean, Hillary, how else should we take it? You said, I'm not running in 2020. And we all started popping champagne corks. But apparently sources have told New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman that Clinton was surprised by the reaction to her interview, and she was waiting to see Robert Mueller's Russia report before deciding. Well, if she's depending on Robert Mueller's Russia report, then I think she's probably not going to be running because there's nothing there. There's nothing there. But and it kind of makes you wonder what's going on in her brain, that she sat there and said, I'm not running in 2020, and then was surprised when everybody reacted to that statement. All right, let's turn to the war zones here. There's more about internal politics a little bit later. The war zones are all heating up, and apparently retired U.S. Army General Robert Scales told Fox Business Trish Regan that the United States military is already operating in the region of Venezuela, by which he means they are operating in Colombia, supposedly to thwart the drug trade, or at least thwart the trade of the competitors. And he's saying the military is already active. It's already ready to go there. They're already in position. They're training the Colombian army. They're keeping watch electronically over the border with Venezuela. And apparently the United States is now getting ready to sanction Cuba. Just going to go right down the list of all these countries in this hemisphere: sanction, invade, sanction, invade, sanction, invade, sanction, invade, sanction, invade. Now, something's going on inside Venezuela because Germany's ambassador, Daniel Kriener, has been declared persona non grata over what Venezuela called interference into its internal affairs, and he has been given just 48 hours to get out of the country. And so something's going on inside there. Apparently, U.S. journalist Cody Weddle has been detained by the Venezuelan military intelligence, and apparently he and his Venezuelan colleague basically were detained by the military after an early morning raid on his home in Caracas. And Weddle is down in Venezuela reporting for WPLEG Local 10 in Miami. And apparently the station is not able to get in touch with him. They're obviously very concerned. His last report was on the return of U.S. recognized interim President Juan Guaido. Okay, now Washington is looking at this kind of you're either with us or you're against us mentality. No middle ground. And the United States is warning nations, third country actors, that do not take our side against Venezuela, they will be hit with sanctions as well. This is coming from Elliot Abrams during a press conference, basically saying you're either with us getting Venezuela overthrown, and if you're not, we're going to sanction you. So, but you know, there's a lot of countries out there that are willing to put up with the sanctions. And apparently over in India, they are getting very restive about resisting Trump's declarations on who they can and cannot trade with. And That's been going on a lot of different places, with the U.S. saying, Turkey, you can't buy the missiles from Russia, and, this country, Qatar, you can't buy from Russia, you've got to buy from us. So apparently the issue with India has to do with Iranian oil and Russia's S-400 systems. And apparently they're increasing their purchase of oil from Iran. So it's going to be interesting. Now, if this Pakistan-India situation escalates, it's going to be interesting to see who is on whose side. Now, do you remember Vovin and Lexus? These are these Russian telephone pranksters. They're known around the world for their trolling of politicians, where they'll get on the phone and they'll pretend to be somebody and they'll hoax them. And apparently they were able to get to Elliott Abrams to find out more about the U.S.-backed effort to unseat that country's legitimate government. And the full audio was reported in Sputnik. Posing as Swiss President Uli Maurer, who also serves as the country's finance minister, the pranksters contacted Abrams on 2 occasions in mid-February and early March, speaking to him for over 23 minutes about Swiss policy on the ongoing effort to freeze the Venezuelan government's assets as part of broader plans to replace Maduro with the U.S.-backed opposition leader Guaido. And they asked him point blank, is the U.S. going to invade Venezuela? This is what Elliott Abrams said. We are not going to do that unless the regime does something completely crazy like attacking the U.S. embassy. But our information suggests that people in the regime and in the military are actually nervous about a U.S. invasion, and we think it is useful to keep them nervous, which is one reason why we will not say publicly, no, this will not happen. Well, Elliott, you just did. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Over in the Senate, Senators Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, and Tom Udall, Democrat of New Mexico, are co-sponsoring a bill calling for the United States to withdraw military forces from Afghanistan. And the resolution is called the 2019 Afghan Forces Going Home After Noble Service Act, or Afghan for short, would simply declare victory. We won. We can get to go home. I don't think anybody looking at that would say that, yes, that was a victory. And you're going to have the interest behind that oil pipeline right of way, not to mention all that opium. They are not going to want Afghanistan to not have a U.S. garrison to protect their interests. So we'll see how far this actually goes. The text of the bill calls for all U.S. troops to be out of Afghanistan within a year of passage. Would also call for all U.S. troops who were deployed in the global war on terror to get bonuses of $2,500. That would be about 3 million troops. All right. Over in the Black Sea, as you know, NATO and the U.S. are stepping up their naval activities in response to the Kerch incident, where Ukrainian ships basically violated Russia's territorial waters, refused to follow the military patrol's orders, and they got taken prisoner. So apparently the commander of the U.S. Navy, Admiral John Michael Richardson, was being asked, what are we going to do about the Black Sea? And what he said was unexpected. When asked at the Atlantic Council in Washington on the 6th of February about the strategy against perceived aggressions from Russia, Richardson reportedly suggested that instead of responding to Moscow's actions, the U.S. should actually push first in a number of areas. So he wants to go in and poke them a little bit. Mike Pompeo, pardon me, is over in the Philippines, and the Philippines are getting very nervous about the possibility of war in their part of the Pacific. So they're dusting off this treaty that they've had with the United States. And in the middle of all the celebrations, festivities, what have you, Mike Pompeo basically came out with his version of the Kennedy Doctrine. And he said, any armed attack by China on a Philippine ship or plane in the South China Sea will be treated as an attack on an American ship or plane, bringing a U.S. military response. So, you know, sometimes it looks like everybody's just gathered around. They're all ready for war. They've got their guns. They've got the ammunition. And they're kind of looking at each other and saying, who's actually going to take that first step? Who's going to be the first one? Because, you know, whoever starts this thing will be demonized and vilified in the history books. Meanwhile, Washington has once again provoked Beijing by flying 2 B-52 nuclear-capable bombers over the South China Sea within close proximity to the Chinese mainland. Now, Trump is still insisting that all of this saber-rattling is not having a negative effect on the trade talks. I'm not sure I can buy that one. I'm not sure I can buy that one at all. Turning over to Syria, there's been a major escalation in northern Hama. Al-Qaeda carried out a major attack on several positions of the Syrian Arab army near the town of Masasna in northern Hama. A military source told South Front that more than 16 Syrian Arab army soldiers were killed in the attack. 6 Ansar al-Tawhid members, that's the Al-Qaeda group, were eliminated. And apparently this attack was launched from the Idlib demilitarized zone, which had been established under a Russian-Turkish agreement in September of last year. Well, I'd say that's not working out too well here. Sergei Lavrov is making a big case for all those people being held at the Rukban camp in southern Syria. And they've been trying to get these people out and get them relocated to their homes. And the United States forces will not let them go. And so Lavrov finally came on out and said, the people at the camp, they're not refugees, they're prisoners. And he says that Washington may be keeping this camp going to justify its continued military presence in Syria. Because, as you know, despite Donald Trump's promise of only a few weeks ago, the United States is not leaving Syria. They're violating the sovereignty of Syria, and they need a good excuse. Oh, look at the poor refugees. We've got to just take care of them. Have you no heart? The United Nations Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons have finally released their report into the alleged chemical weapons attack in Douma in the Syrian Arab Republic. Despite having a mandate to apportion blame, the OPCW did not. And what they basically found is they visited multiple sites where the attack supposedly took place, the hospital as well. And what they found was there were no chemical weapons. They found traces of chlorine, but they found no chemical weapons. And so now that bombing of Syria with cruise missiles by the United States, France, and Kingdom was completely unjustified. It was done under false pretenses. But then we've seen that before with, you know, Saddam's nuclear bombs. We'll probably see it again with Maduro's going to be accused of something. That's how they win your approval. They lie to you. And they lie to you an awful, awful lot. Great Britain has approved the sale of arms to Israel worth $445 million since the 2014 Gaza war, including components for drones, combat aircraft, and helicopters, along with spare parts for sniper rifles, according to figures seen by the Middle East Eye. The government data will raise fresh concerns that British-made weapons are being used by the Israeli military in the occupied territories, amid fears that components in sniper rifles used to kill scores of Palestinian civilians in recent weeks could have been made in Great Britain. And there are some British politicians who are saying, we've got to stop doing this. Unfortunately, Israel's supporters are screaming that they're anti-Semites and Jew haters, and everybody's making money off these weapon sales anyway. Israel has struck a Hamas compound in Gaza yesterday, supposedly in response to more of these explosive balloons. And I got to tell you, I think those explosive balloons are a false flag, because they don't do anything. They never hit anything. The only time one of them has ever caused any damage, it broke a window. They're not an effective weapon. The only thing they're good for is to give Israel an excuse to say, oh, let's go in and bomb them again. So I think these explosive balloons are actually being released by agent provocateurs working for Israel. All right, not too long ago, the United Nations put together a database of companies that have business ties to the Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. And it was supposed to be out by now, but the UN is again delaying it under pressure from Israel, because what this database would do is allow people to target these companies involved in these illegal settlements for more boycotts. Now, Israel has denounced the database as a blacklist. Well, you're the one who made it black. This next pair of stories really signals some intense tensions. The Jerusalem courts have said they will close a contested building on the Temple Mount, reopened by Muslim worshippers last month, unless the Islamic custodian, who refuses to appear before Israel courts as a matter of principle, responds to the case. Now, this has to do with the Bab al-Rama mosque. This is the one that Israelis are already saying should be converted into a synagogue. Now, the Islamic Council has rejected the Israeli court closure at the Al-Aqsa compound, and they're saying that Bab al-Rama will remain open for Muslims to pray. So we're coming up on actual conflict on that Temple Mount here. Senate Armed Services Committee Chairman Jim Inhofe said Tuesday that he wants to add language to the annual defense policy bill that codifies President Trump's withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal. See, right now it's just an executive act. And Trump could turn right around with another executive act and get us back into that deal. I wish he would. Inhofe wants it to be an actual law so that Trump can't undo it all that easily. So Inhofe is saying basically that countries like Iran are just waiting Trump out. They think he's going to lose his next election. And the Iranians are hoping that the next president will be willing to reestablish the deal that John Kerry made. So, over in Qatar, they are still studying the purchase of Russia's S-400 missile air defense system, and basically rebuffing Saudi Arabia's opposition, saying it's none of Riyadh's business. Speaking of Saudi Arabia, very interesting little story out of The Guardian. And apparently there are signs of this rift growing between King Salman of Saudi Arabia and his heir, Mohammed bin Salman. Apparently they've had major disagreements over a number of important policy issues in recent weeks. And apparently the unease has been building ever since the murder in Turkey of the dissident Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, which the CIA concluded was ordered by Prince Mohammed. However, these tensions increased dramatically in late February when the king, who's 83, visited Egypt, and he was warned by his advisors he was at risk of a potential move against him. And his entourage was so alarmed at the possible threat to his authority that a new security team comprised of more than 30 hand-picked loyalists from the Interior Ministry was flown to Egypt to replace the existing team. So it looks like the king was concerned about a coup d'etat or an assassination. And it can happen. That's what happened to Indira Gandhi. She was killed by her own protective detail. Speaking of India, apparently radar and satellite images of Indian Air Force strikes in Balakot are showing significant damages to one of Jaish al-Mohammed's largest training camps. We're going to take a break for commercials. We've got a caller waiting on the line. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And for those of you who would like to help out Republic Broadcasting, and folks, I cannot stress how important it is that you do so. The equipment is old. It's wearing out. It needs to be replaced. We need to get kibble for our control room personnel. Got to pay the electric bill, the hosting bill. It takes a lot to run an operation like this. and we do need your help. We don't have people like George Soros sending us huge amounts of money. We don't have large corporations who are backing us. We rely on you. And so the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other time. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I know you talked about King Salmon, how they didn't tell him, like, they changed his security detail. He found out about it, like, on TV.
Really?
Yeah. So, you know what, Mike? It's like, hey, Daddy, sit by this window here. Look at that view. I'll be back.
Yes.
But, like, yeah, I mean, that's basically, that's how much they all trust each other. They don't. Pretty much.
Well, I don't think it's unique to the Saudis. I mean, look at British history, and you'll find out that, those princes, they're just close enough to that throne to drive them a little bit crazy. Richard II comes to mind.
They're all wealthy, though. Like, to be on the throne or not, like, they're all wealthy. They all have golden chairs and a fleet of cars and mansions. They have Rivero mansions and all this other crap. Like, why would the ones who, like, why would you want to be in power when you can be, like, on the Riviera? You know what I mean?
Well, I imagine there's a lot of people who are on the Riviera out of their free choice, and they don't represent a threat to the ruling class. But there are other individuals. Again, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, he's next in line, and he wasn't meant to be. It's just King Solomon basically took the crown princedom, if you will, away from his next oldest brother, who should have been next in line for the throne, and gave it to Muhammad. And I guess it just played on Muhammad's head. But it does look to me like there may have been an aborted palace coup of some kind.
Remember when he had all those people put in the hotel? Was it the Carl Ritz over there?
Yep.
And then also there was that helicopter that got shot down, and then there was those shooting. Remember he went into an undisclosed location for a while because there's some kind of shooting involved. So
yep.
I mean, yeah, it's very flaky over there anymore. I don't know. I never ever heard about it being that flaky over there. Maybe not since like 1940s and whatever. But I mean, it's a lot of stuff going on.
There really is. There is a lot. And of course, the other part of it is our generation has access to much more sources of information than our parents' generation had. So we're hearing a lot more about it as immediate news rather than looking back in history books or movies.
Like, I want to talk about Trump real quick. How, I still will never vote for this guy. I don't know, Mike. You got immigration. It's like nothing's been done. They're still streaming across the border. That's on the front of the Drudge Report.
Yep.
We got a record trade deficit. Nothing's been done. Like, what? Nothing's been done. And it's just the same old modus operandi. The same people that were in Bush administration is in his administration.
Yep.
It's just like nothing has changed. I know some people think things have changed, but not really in just the scheme of things, right? I mean, just the same system. Nothing's been fixed. Oh, and the election thing hasn't been fixed, like you always say.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't see anything to look forward with Trump. It's either he's scared to do it, or he's part of the problem, or he's part of the system, and we've been duped. I mean, that's the only two choices. I don't know. Do you think we've been duped?
Well, we definitely did not get the Donald Trump that we voted for. My next story that I was going to report on was from Sputnik News. Basically, it's showing that John Bolton is pretty much running Trump's foreign policy. And I guess Trump just decided he didn't want to be bothered, or Bolton just came on in. But according to this story, apparently Bolton reduced the number of meetings of top national security meetings to a bare minimum. He's replaced specialists in the National Security Council with non-specialists who share his hawkish views. And apparently he's just constantly in Trump's office, literally sprinting to the Oval Office, trying to influence Trump's decisions. So,
and we voted for Trump. We didn't vote for John Bolton, but Trump put in John Bolton. So it all leads, like all roads lead to Rome. Trump put these people in. That's the
yeah,
bottom
but he
line,
did it
right?
to pay back political favors. I mean, Sheldon Adelson is the one who really wanted these people in there. Anyway, Dustin, got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and I'm looking more at the situation between King Solomon and the Crown Prince. And I want to clear up some possible confusion that we had from Dustin's phone call. King Solomon was well aware of the security shuffle. Apparently, there was concern that some of his security personnel were loyal to Crown Prince bin Solomon, and all of a sudden, in the middle of this trip, that became a problem. And they even dismissed the Egyptian security personnel who were guarding the king while he was in Egypt, while they flew in these 30 hand-picked loyalists. And the king knew all about that. The part that he had to find out on TV was that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, while serving as the deputy king, which is what they do when the king is out of the country, was to do some personnel changes. And one was the appointment of a female ambassador to the U.S., Princess Rima bint Bandar bint Sultan, and he promoted his full brother Khalid bin Salman to the Ministry of Defense, which further concentrated power in one branch of the ruling family. That's what the king found out on TV and was apparently very angry. First of all, he didn't think Khalid was ready for a senior position. And yeah, it does look like there are going to be sparks. There are going to be sparks. There's no question out there. All right, let's take a phone call here from Miles in Maine. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I got to agree with Dustin there on this illegal alien thing, and I thought it would be interesting how we have these debt clocks. I mean, if we had an illegal alien clock that was on every channel or as many channels as we could get it, and it just showed every day 2,500, 5,000, 10,000, whatever's coming through here, because I don't think we're ever going to really know, but from what they tell us and what our best estimates would be. And I think it would just be beautiful to just have this thing rolling and rolling, and then underneath it, instead of a debt clock, the debt that this illegal alien invasion costs us every day, yearly, and with the budget. Just a really nice illustration to kind of get it home to these people, and in particular these Democrats and any of these Republicans that go along with the illegal invasion here. And secondly, I had another question for you. It was about yesterday's call. You were talking to Art from Off the Grid.
Yes.
And you had mentioned a pain reliever that was natural, so you can do something for yourself naturally. And you called it
Kratom.
Kratom or
Kratom.
K-R-A-T-O-M. Could you spell that one? Kratom. Michael, thank you very much, and keep up the good work. Always an amazing show.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. And I just did a quick web search, and I'm not seeing an immigration clock. You're right. We should have one. I thought maybe there's that website that has all those different clocks on it, the national debt, the per person share of the debt, all this other stuff. They might have it. But again, how do you really know? I mean, they're just pouring across that border. It's not like they're going through a turnstile where they can keep an accurate count. And our phone lines are open again. Now, earlier in the program, I was talking about how the United States loves to throw its weight around to try and make deals, preferring to arm twist the sales rather than to come up with a really good product at a good price that the customer would really like here. So the United States is warning Turkey once again that its planned purchase of the Russian S-400 air defense system would put at risk Turkey's participation in the F-35 jet program and could lead to sanctions imposed on Ankara. This was Department of State spokesman Robert Palladino in a press briefing. And so they're basically saying, if you won't buy our rockets, we're not going to sell the cool airplane. which doesn't seem to be that cool here. Over in Israel, as you know, we're coming up on their elections. There have been some reshuffling of the parties, forming of new coalitions that have really raised a lot of eyebrows. But as of right now, half of Israel voters still haven't decided who they're going to vote for. Half. I think that's significant. I think the Israeli people are they're mystified by their government here. As you know, Russia has built some, or is building some amazing weapons. One of them is the Zircon hypersonic cruise missile. And the Zircon hasn't attracted the same level of media hysteria as the Avangard reentry vehicle or even the air-launched Kinzhal aeroballistic missile. It does represent an important advance in military technology and represents the state-of-the-art of Russia's military technologies. The secrecy surrounding the 3M22 Zircon, to the point of there existing no official images of the weapon, is remarkable and reminds one of the careful efforts to conceal the true nature of the P-700 Granite heavy anti-ship missile, specifically its air-breathing ramjet propulsion. Anyway, these are all seen as challenging U.S. naval dominance. So, of course, we have the Navy coming on back and say, well, you're just going to have to give us more money. You're just going to have to give us more money. There's a lot of deception out there. In fact, I was down at the Pearl Harbor Museums with some guests the other day, and they were looking at some models. And I recall this story from my model making days. And this was about the time the F-117 stealth fighter came on out. Nobody'd seen it. Nobody knew what it looked like. And one of the plastic model companies came out with what they said was the stealth fighter. And it was completely wrong. And worse than that, I could tell looking at it, this thing would never fly even if it did. And I was wondering, were they just trying to get to market sooner, to get something for people to play with, or was it a clever plot to perhaps send Russia down a wrong path? Because obviously one of the things that spies will do in each other's countries is buy up anything related to the military, model kits, picture books, and send them back home here. Over in Korea, we're seeing the start of the denouement, I think, if you will, from the failure of the second summit. And according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, North Korea has started rebuilding that rocket launch facility that they had torn down. Now, the facility was also used for peaceful scientific satellite launches, so please keep that in mind. But obviously, Kim Jong-un thinks he's not going to get anything from Donald Trump. What Kim Jong-un wanted was parity. We'll start getting rid of our nuclear weapons, you start getting rid of the sanctions, and Trump did that same old thing. No, you got to do what we say first, and then we'll do nice for you. And that does not play very well in the rest of the world. The top U.S. commander in Europe on Tuesday declared that American and NATO troops could not yet mount a credible deterrence against Russian aggression, noting the Kremlin's efforts to modernize its armed forces are eroding the United States military advantage in Europe. This is General Curtis Scaparotti, the U.S. European Command head, NATO's supreme allied commander. And he's basically saying there's a lack of manpower, naval capability shortfalls, inadequate intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capacity. Why? Those are the reasons. American and NATO troops are unable to handle the credible deterrences against Russian aggression. So give us more money. We need more money. We need to modernize our force. We want more money. Money, 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 money. Speaking of money, the U.S. Department of Defense wants to retire an old aircraft carrier early. We talked about this, I think, about a week ago, while building 2 new ones, along with adding other goodies to their Christmas wish list. And to nobody's surprise, politicians from states with the shipyards and naval bases that employ their constituents want to keep the old carrier and build the new ones, because those carriers take a lot of care and upkeep, and it's more money here. Now, the nation would be better off if Congress retired the USS Harry S. Truman and nixed the Department of Defense request for 2 new Ford-class carriers and worked up plans for an orderly retirement of several more carriers. This next sentence repeats something I've been saying for a long time. The U.S. Navy's surface warfare ship complement is too large, too expensive, and too fighting previous wars oriented to serve any rational defense purpose. Well, I'm glad I'm not the only person who noticed that. So, anyway. Over in Poland, the U.S. Air Force MQ-9 Reapers, based in Poland, are now fully operational. They've actually been flying reconnaissance missions since last May. But this month, the drones have become fully operational, which I presume means they may even be armed. And they're being piloted by a combination of U.S. military personnel and contractors as well. Okay. The Army is launching a new program to train soldiers to fight underground. And the concern there is that as you get into the urban environment, there are subways, there are steam tunnels, there are all kinds of underground structures there that have to be fought in. And so they're trying to basically come up with the best way for these soldiers to fight underground, which obviously is going to include night vision gear. And the problem with night vision gear in a totally pitch black environment is there has to be an illuminator, infrared, and that in turn can give your position away to the enemy. Trump has signed an executive order to expedite the transition of troops into the merchant marines. And he signed this 2 days ago. And basically, it looks to me like they're getting ready to start putting together convoys. If there's going to be a major war, there are going to be convoys, and that's what the merchant marine is for. So let's talk about our internal domestic politics here, and the attacks are continuing on Ilhan Omar. In fact, they're rising. They're getting more shrill, more intense, as she's basically one of the first Muslim women elected. She's also black, an African immigrant, a former refugee from Somalia. She wears her hijab in the halls of Congress. She's under attack from the leaders of her own party for anti-Semitic statements she never actually made, for anti-Jewish prejudice she never actually expressed, or hatred for Jews, which she doesn't really hold. They're just making a huge stink about it to distract from the fact that what Ilhan Omar said was basically true. Some people just can't handle the truth. And all of AIPAC's obedient trolls in Congress that are squealing like stuck pigs, saying, you can't do that, you can't do that. And Ilhan Omar's All About the Benjamins tweet and the media feeding frenzy that followed unleashed an unprecedented expose of Jewish Zionist money power in America. And we know how much Sheldon Adelson poured into the election this last year. It's an open secret. You could go to the Federal Election Commission. The records are all there. How much money is pouring in from these pro-Israel groups here. And a lot of people are coming to Omar's defense. Phyllis Bennis is out there in The Real News saying that Ilhan Omar's denunciation of the Israel lobby is not anti-Semitic, and no, it is not. We're talking about the actions of politicians. And the reason they're screaming about it, and by the way, the more members of Congress scream at Ilhan Omar, the more they're making her case. Because Americans are looking at this spectacle and saying, what the heck is going on here? Don't these clowns have got anything more pressing to work on? There was an article over in Outline basically saying, it raises the question, is AIPAC too powerful? It is making it a topic of discussion for polite company. And of course, every time there's anything that exposes Israel's undue influence over our country, oh, it's anti-Semitism, it's this, it's that. Somebody put up a video, do you care that Israel controls you as politicians? Well, you ought to. You really ought to, because we, the American people, are supposed to be in control of America's politicians. Now, American Jews, including prominent figures like Naomi Klein, have signed an open letter in support of Ilhan Omar. And I love this last quote from the letter. We thank Ilhan Omar for having the bravery to shake up the congressional taboo against criticizing Israel. As Jews with a long tradition of social justice and anti-racism, AIPAC does not represent us. All right. And a little bit of good news. Eliot Engel, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, was being interviewed on CNN and said he is against the removal of Ilhan Omar from his committee. So I'm glad she's standing up. She's not backing down anymore. She shouldn't have even apologized the first time. Because that's the only way you can defeat. When they're smearing you with this stuff, you just stand right up to them and you give back just as good as they give you. If you back down, they keep pushing, building up momentum. Even Reality Check did a segment saying Representative Omar's comments on Israel were not anti-Semitic, and they aren't. They are comments on politics. They're comments on the actions of a government. And Israel has been pushing really hard to have anti-Semitism redefined to mean criticism of Israel's government so that they can silence it, so that they can do what they want to do to the Palestinians and the people in the West Bank and the people of Gaza, and you will be forbidden under threat of prison for saying, hey, why are you blowing up all these people? But we're in an age right now where truth tellers of all kinds are being censored. And there's filtering on social media, there's filtering apparently now of the email system. PaulCraigRoberts.org sends out a newsletter, and people are saying they're not getting it. So it is really, it is a dictatorship out there. It is a dictatorship. Okay, we're going to take another break here for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And as you know, everybody is already gearing up for 2020. And apparently there's some concern as to how many of the Democrats that are getting ready to run against Trump in 2020 have previously been given donations by him. And Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner hosted a Park Avenue fundraiser for Cory Booker. Kirsten Gillibrand took in Trump family donations 3 times across a 7-year period, and then gave a similar amount of money to a nonprofit years later after the president mocked her in a tweet. So it's going to be kind of interesting. Makes follow the money take on new meaning here. Adam Schiff, in cranking up the next of the investigations into Donald Trump. They're just going to keep throwing more investigations at him. So Adam Schiff announced that the House Intelligence Committee has hired Daniel Goldman to be a senior advisor and lead the committee's investigative operations as it continues its probe into the President Donald Trump's campaign alleged collusion with Russia. Even though several other investigations haven't found anything, well, by golly, we're going to go in one more time. Now, Goldman frequently appears as a legal analyst on NBC and MSNBC, worked as assistant United States attorney in the criminal division of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York from 2007 and 2017, according to his bio on the Brennan Center for Justice, a George Soros-funded organization that just named him a fellow in one of its programs. So that's one investigation. Over on the House Judiciary Committee, chaired by Jerry Nadler, they fired off 81 document requests to various individuals and organizations to try and find crimes committed by Trump, his 2016 campaign, or members of the current administration. And the long list of recipients includes Julian Assange, the NRA, Michael Flynn, Steve Bannon, George Papadopoulos, Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg, while Nadler's inquisition is expected to focus on 3 broad areas of interest: allegations of obstruction of justice, public corruption, and other abuses of power. And Nadler was being interviewed on ABC, telling George Stephanopoulos, it's very clear the president obstructed justice, at which point the Wall Street Journal board had some bad news for Nadler, because nothing Nadler has cited is actually illegal. It's going to be another big nothing burger on a gluten-free bun here. Tom Fitton over at Judicial Watch was on Lou Dobbs Tonight and said that this Nadler's investigation, it's a remarkable abuse of power. And it is. It's harassment. It's a fishing expedition. They don't have probable cause. They're just out there trying to rifle through everything that they can find until they find something. Mueller was doing that. Word is he's failed on that one. Okay, we got to take a break here for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And before we get back into the domestic politics, I just got an email from somebody who's up in our old stomping ground, Seattle, Washington. And apparently that naval base across the Puget Sound from Seattle just dumped 4,000 gallons of raw sewage into the inlet. And he says, this is the second time now. I think the Navy's anthem should be There I Did It Again by Britney Spears instead of Anchors Away. Yeah, that happens. We actually had an Aegis-class ship run up. It missed the channel coming into Pearl. This happened about 4 years ago. And it ran onto the reef. And the only way they could get it off the reef was to literally dump all the holding tanks for all the heads on the ship. And it just created a heck of a mess. And Hawaii tried to sue the Navy for the environmental damage, because we have very strict environmental laws out here. I don't recall that the Navy ever really did much of anything about it. All right. The other day we were talking about this story where President Donald Trump issued an order for Jared Kushner to be given a security clearance, and that this ruffled the feathers of some of the White House staff, like then Chief of Staff John Kelly, White House Counsel Don McGahn. And I said I wasn't sure if the president actually does have that authority. As it turns out, yes, he does. He has the legal authority to grant clearances. So he was within his rights and authority, both for Jared Kushner, and apparently now he wants one for Ivanka Trump. I can't imagine why. I mean, I'm not dissing Ivanka Trump, but she's not taking part in the government as far as I know. All righty. Somebody just sent me this cartoon. Here we go. Hillary Clinton clarifies, says she was misunderstood when she said she wasn't running. When a Clinton speaks, their words have an expiration date. This one was 24 hours. Well, I prefer my little egg timer instead. But yeah, that is just so weird. Okay. And I want to do this little flashback story because in this era of rampant corruption, it's important that we keep looking at what was going on. Early in the Hillary Clinton email case, the Department of Justice reached a decision that would basically impact the FBI's investigation into Clinton's use of a private email server. The Department of Justice, under then Attorney General Loretta Lynch, decided to set an unusually high threshold for prosecuting Clinton, basically ensuring from the outset she would not be charged. In order for Clinton to be prosecuted, the Department of Justice required the FBI to establish evidence of intent, even though Title 18 does not require this. So it was Loretta Lynch who basically rigged the investigation so that Hillary could skate free. But of course, she's never been charged. She's never had her day in court. at some point, she could still find herself standing before a judge. I don't know what the statute of limitations is for Title 18 felony violations, but I imagine it's probably not short here. All right, let's talk about the economic news. There's a lot going on here. And as you know, we're going back and forth with tariffs, China, and everybody's out there saying pro and con. But tariffs are just another form of tax. And like any tax, the increase in cost to a tariffed product gets passed on to the consumer. And it is amazing how many people think that this trade war with China is costing China. It doesn't. Just last year, Americans spent $1.4 billion per month on trade war taxes. That's how much it's costing us. $1.4 billion a month, every month, last year. It's you who pay for the tariffs, not the Chinese here. Over at Whole Foods, which is now owned by Amazon, as you know, there was a big stink, public pressure, and talking about the pay of the warehouse workers. Amazon enacted a $15 minimum wage for all its employees as of the 1st of last November, including workers at grocery chain Whole Foods, which it purchased in 2017. All Whole Foods employees paid less than $15 an hour saw their wages increase to at least that, with all other team members receiving a $1 an hour wage increase and team leaders receiving a $2 an hour increase. But since the wage increase, Whole Food employees are saying their hours are being cut back to the point where it negates the wage gains. Now, why this is very angering to me is these employees are being paid the money, but are being told to do less work, which means if we go into a Whole Foods, the service isn't going to be as good. It's not going to be as clean. I think this was just a bad move. And it's another excess of corporate greed. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Italy is now planning to formally back China's multi-trillion-dollar Belt and Road Initiative. It would become the first G7 nation to join the project, which promises to significantly boost global trade. And Rome is preparing to sign a memorandum of understanding to officially support the project, championed by Chinese President Xi Jinping by the end of March. And, of course, that's raising eyebrows in Washington. Because that Road and Belt Initiative, it's going to make it much cheaper, much faster, much easier for goods grown and manufactured in Asia to reach the European markets. And the U.S. is looking at those European markets and getting a little bit of nervous. Down on the border. Remember about a month ago, there was this New York Times editorial that said, there is no emergency at the border. Really, you're just being silly. Well, that was then, this is now. And the New York Times now concedes the border is at a breaking point. Remember, as Trump gave his State of the Union speech last month, the Times branded the president a liar over his claim there's an urgent national crisis at our border. Times said this is false, using a non sequitur about individuals attempting to cross the border, while admitting at the bottom of the fact check that a record number of families have tried to cross the border in recent months. And there are a lot of people, and nobody really knows how many there are. The U.S. Border Patrol apprehended more than 66,000 migrants at the southern border just in February. 66,000 just for the month that we just got out of, the highest total for a single month in almost a decade. The majority of those arrested were migrant families or children traveling alone or without a parent, according to figures released Tuesday by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Now, many of the migrants say they're fleeing criminal gangs and poverty in Central America to seek asylum in the United States. All right, we're going to take a phone call now from Layla in Canada. Layla, aloha. I haven't heard from you in a while. What's on your mind?
I haven't been listening to your show, so I hope I'm not repeating anything that's been said before. I've been doing a lot of research, and I've come to realize that what I suspected is accurate. There is no such thing as a Jewish ethnicity.
Yes.
It was a pejorative that was created in Europe, and a lot of people, and also the three dominant Jewish religions of today, especially Chabad, were all created in the extremist ghettos where they were always self-segregated because they considered themselves superior to everyone else.
Yes.
And having a direct line to the one supreme God. Unfortunately, I have listened to some recordings of some of the lessons that they give in teaching Hebrew. The Hebrew that they teach is not even a legitimate language. It was also a fabricated synthesis. And they're even daring to call it biblical Hebrew. But there's just an arrogance, a supreme arrogance, a presumption of entitlement to the planet that is utterly terrifying. If the U.S. wants to survive, then the Americans who are still capable of doing so must do everything in their power to destroy Israel, to bring it down, because it is a threat not only to the U.S. and all Western civilizations, it is a threat to the planet. It is a threat to the concept of human dignity and anything that we value as representing humane and compassionate behavior. As for the migrants from the South, I mean, that's another topic. But I think a little more leniency there might be good because many of them realize that that much of their countries have been destroyed by Israeli agitation and instigation and by Israeli arms sales. They may, in fact, become good allies. Just a suggestion. So I will leave that to you to follow up on.
All right. Well, I'll take a look at that. But you're absolutely right. In fact, there was another scientific paper released only recently, basically saying there is no such thing as a Jewish gene. Judaism is a religion, and there is no Jewish gene, just like there's no Muslim gene and there's no Christian gene. Everybody who is Jewish converted from other religions. You have the Ashkenazis, who are descendants from Central Asian Khazars. You have the Sephardic, who are a blend between Hebrew and Berber. Must have been an interesting proposal on that one. And some of the others. But there is no Jewish ethnicity. It's a religion.
There never was. There never was.
Yep.
It's all what they did. And in fact, now that I've been reading the original documents, in Aramaic and in Hebrew, they never talk about Jews. They talk about Yahudim and about the Aramite when we're talking about the area that they claim as having been the land of the Jews, where they are historically connected to, and therefore it's their entitlement because God promised it to them. And this deed was created in the great bureaucracy up in the heavens. That absurdity, today's Americans need to look at the ignorance of the evangelical Christians because they are the ones. And right now, they've got all sorts of websites and efforts to try, and they're terrified because a lot of evangelicals are beginning to see what Israel really is.
Yes.
And they're beginning to feel shame and sympathy with those people who are being abused by the most arrogant and cruel means. So they're terrified. And what they're doing is, whereas in the past they ridiculed Jesus and his mother, and the Jewish text of Europe used to refer to her as a harlot. Now suddenly, Jesus was a wonderful Jew. Jesus was a Jew. They're building up. Basically, Israel is making itself a money-making Disneyland theme park, while that finances their military acquisition of all the valuable resources of this planet. Everyone that claims to be a Jew is absolutely a fraud, because they are it's 2,000 years later. They may be Jews in the modern sense, but we have to draw very clear distinctions with modern so-called Jews and the ancient peoples who were actually, there was a prophet, and he's mentioned in the Quran. There was a prophet named Hud. Yah is a way of saying, referring to a particular group. So Yahud, Yahudim is the plural in the ancient Hebrew, and in the Aramaic, the which I now discover is a language that my ancestry spoke, it ends in the suffixes is where you can tell the difference in the name and the way the words are converted, because case and gender and all of those depend on this construction of the words. But now that I unfortunately, like a fool, I initially relied on the English translations. Now that I have taken advantage of what I learned from my parents and have studied the alphabet, which is actually quite simple. If you look at the original documents, they always refer to them as Yahudim or Arami. And there are so many, there are dozens of groups, and none of them were distinct ethnic groups. All of these nomadic groups were basically pastoralists that were related to settled communities throughout Syria. And Syria, that's a disgrace what's happening in Syria. I mean, the fact that we've tolerated it, and this fool Trump, I'm sorry, Zionist organizations in New York, and lied to everybody, and became president. I don't think he is necessarily a better choice than Hillary Clinton. As much as I detested her, and still do detest her, and consider her a lowlife, I don't think Trump is any better.
Well, Trump has been certainly a major disappointment, and I think he's a one-term president. And now, of course, we have Hillary saying that she's not going to run, and then she is going to run. And apparently she's waiting for the Mueller report for her final decision. The information we're getting leaked out is the Mueller report isn't going to contain much of anything. They're not going to be able to impeach him. It's amazing how rancorous politics has become in this country. And they're not even trying to hide it from the public anymore.
And that's the key thing, Mike. It's no longer being hidden. It's actually, if you go back, Benjamin Franklin was an absolutely corrupt man. He was sexually promiscuous.
Yes.
He neglected his family. He used to copulate with women in France to get the money in order to finance the revolution. He completely, until he got so old that he needed his daughter, but he was close with his illegitimate son. And the things that, that he said are horrible. And then we go back to the comment made by Thomas Jefferson. We hold that all men are created equal. There is no more absurd comment that I can imagine.
Yes.
Now, when that came out of the English Enlightenment, they were referring to their own kind. They were the people who were deprived by the so-called nobles and elite. And so they were not talking about the whole planet because they didn't really have a concept. All the other people were inferior, especially in British eyes.
Yes.
Remember, it was either wogs or polywogs or whatever they called them. They had a name for everybody that made them subhuman. But the British Enlightenment that Jefferson was quoting, that all men are created equal, that came out of a concept of they are my neighbors, they are like me, so they are the same skin color as me, they are my religion, my language, we should all be equal in that sense. Meanwhile, he owned slaves and had children by a slave, as we all now recognize.
Yeah, but Layla, back then when he was alive, that was considered acceptable behavior, and we have to be very careful. It's too easy to get into the habit of judging people who lived way in the past by our own standards today, and it's really not fair.
But by the time of Thomas Jefferson and the concept of the Enlightenment, to say all men are created equal, and then to own human beings like cattle, that is not unfair. because a person who says that while living the opposite, it should not be revered. I mean, I used to be one of those who utterly revered the founding fathers.
Yes.
I thought they were, because they were portrayed so as such idealistic and wonderful men who lived by such high norms and were such intellectuals. Well, the reality is very far from it.
Yeah.
And the few presidents who were actually ethical were murdered.
Yeah, you're right about that. Anyway, Layla, thank you for the call. We got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back with more news. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And just doing some research on email. We seem to be having a lot of problems with email getting to Southern California, pretty much anywhere else. And we're getting this strange error message that I've never seen before. So if there's an email expert out there, you can call into the show here. Recipient address rejected, user unknown in virtual alias table. Now, I've been working with email for a very long time. I've never seen that one before. So once again, the engineers have changed something, and we're all scrambling to catch up. All right, let's take a phone call. Nick, retired Delta pilot. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, sir. I've been working on this TWA 800 thing for 20-some-odd years, and I filed a petition with the NTSB. I've uncovered 21 new pieces of evidence, basically confirming that it was a U.S. Navy missile shot from a submarine called the Seawolf off Long Island.
Yes.
I've got the airspace and altitude reservation from the controlling agency, which handles the warning areas off Long Island. And one of the requirements that they want is the names and the individuals or corporations of the information that I have. And one of the things that I have is what was recorded. It's new. The NTSB record has been changed, which came from what really happened. And what I need is verification to send into them, because they're more concerned about dotting the I's and crossing all the T's as opposed to the information confirming that this was a military exercise and it was a errant missile that knocked down TWA.
So you're talking about that in the official wreckage, the notice, the NOTAM, the notice to airmen and mariners, has been changed or gone away.
Yes, there was there's an agency, controlling agency for the U.S. Navy called VA Capes, which operates out of Oceana, Virginia, and they sent a reservation the night, one day before the July 17th, 1996 disaster, and it gives the altitudes, the longitude and latitude of the controlling airspace. I used to be a New York Center controller, and I know the area. It's called 105, warning area 105 and 106, Alpha and Bravo.
Yes.
Which on an aeronautical map delineates the area that they use. And TWA 800 was in domestic airspace. They were only about 8 miles off the coast and of Long Island, and the warning area started 12 miles off the coast. So this missile that hit the airplane was in domestic airspace. And basically I go into that, and also the changing of the air data on the on the aircraft itself, and also the flammability of they claim it was 50 gallons in a tank that holds 28,000 cubic feet of air, and 50 gallons is the amount that was in the residual fuel in the tank.
Well, which tank are we talking about? Anyway, we're almost out of time here. Listen, would you shoot me an email saying exactly what it is that you need me to come up with you, because I need to get back to doing the radio show. I haven't actually looked at this stuff in so long, and it may take me a while to try and dig something out here.
What email address should I send it to?
Just the one that's at the top of the website, wrh@whatreallyhappened.com.
What is that again?
Whiskey Romeo Hotel at whatreallyhappened.com.
Okay. I'll send you what I have, and matter of fact, I'll send you a copy of the petition for reconsideration and modification that I sent to the NTSB, that they're disputing. They claim it was a center fuel tank, and as I said, I was an international captain, and I happened to retire 2 months prior to the disaster. And had I been 2 months younger, it conceivably could have been me, because I was flying out of Kennedy to Europe.
Okay, well, we got to take another break here for commercials, and I'm going to have to let you go, but just shoot me the email, and I'll try and come up with something to help you out, okay? So we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take another phone call from Dan in Washington State. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for taking the call. I guess I kind of just want to disagree with the lady that called in about Jews not being a race or ethnicity. So I guess my question to you would be, how many generations, if different races intermix, it's kind of just an argument of how long it takes to become an ethnicity, because if they've had a tiny population, even though they had different roots, mixing with each other in a tiny little community, eventually they will become an ethnicity, I guess. It's kind of like Mexicans, there's no Mexican ethnicity. It's either Spanish usually or Native American.
Native Americans, yeah. I think you just shot your own theory down. And again, if you look at all the world's Jewish people, there are so many different varieties of them. And it may be a good thing, because several years back, there was word that Israel was working to produce ethnically sensitive biological weapons that would kill everybody who didn't have the Jewish gene. But since it turned out there is no such thing, hopefully they have destroyed those weapons.
Yeah, I guess I wonder how long it takes before it becomes a new ethnicity. Like, eventually Mexicans would develop a Mexican gene. I don't know how long that takes, 1,000 years or 10,000 years.
Really don't know. In fact, evolution tends to work the other way, with more and more mixing. I mean, in order to create, let's look at dog breeding, okay? In order to create a new breed of dog, you first of all have to mix and match to get the characteristics that you want, and you can't allow any outside genes to come on in. And finally, I think you have to be able to have this new breed you've created survive for at least 3 generations with its genetic characteristics intact, and after that you can go start the paperwork to say, I've developed a new breed of dog. So I think you would have to do pretty much the same thing with humans, where you'd be in strict control of who they're mating with in an effort to stabilize the genome, rather than just let it run amok and with wild mixing.
Yeah, and didn't for many generations, weren't they doing that, though? Like, they would not breed out, or usually made outside the Jewish faith, they would kind of...
Yeah, you just hit the word. You just hit the word. Okay, they first of all, it was a problem when a Jewish man married outside the faith, but it was always acceptable for a Jewish woman to marry outside the faith because they were bringing more people into the religion. And as you said, it was a question of the faith, not of racial grouping. Although there was a lot of hostility between them. I remember when I was in my first marriage, and they were Ashkenazi, and they just hated all other kinds of Jewish people. And I never told them I was Sephardic. I let them go on thinking I was, Hispanic.
Huh.
Okay, well,
thanks a lot.
all right, thanks a lot, Dan. We're going to let you go and switch over to Terry in California. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, in response to that, retired Delta pilot called in about TWA 800.
Yes.
I was flying a pilot on the 747 when they came out with a resolution on that, and they said the center fuel tank got an arc from the fuel pumps, and it blew the airplane up in half.
Yep.
So the resolution was we couldn't put any fuel in the center tank, and we had to pull those circuit breakers on the center tank. And we knew, this airplane's been flying for over 20 years before that, more than that. And we knew that was all hoax, that, there wasn't anything to that. It just cut down on our range. But it was interest to me, that whole thing, because there was another pilot in my reserve squadron that was a passenger on that. He was a TWA pilot who was pass riding home to his wife's home in Europe. But anyway, what was the big thing that stood out on that, and also 9/11, was for every aircraft accident, the NTSB has jurisdiction. They go in, they rope off the crash site, or if it's in the water, they take charge of that. They're in charge. But in that case, in 9/11, the FBI was in charge. And I think with both of them, they told the NTSB to stay home, we'll take care of it. Now, that to me is suspicious, both cases. And I don't know what you think about that, but I'd like to hear it. And that's all I had, Mike, and I just want to, hang up and let you talk.
Okay, well, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. Yeah, anytime the FBI swoops on into anything, whether it's a plane crash or a shooting or a sinking or whatever, you have to ask yourself, what are they doing here? Because we now know that the FBI is not about investigations. They are basically the American version of the Gestapo to enforce the will of the rulers. And they have a long history of framing people. They were certainly doing a lot of that during COINTELPRO in the 1960s. They framed James Earl Ray for the assassination of Martin Luther King. It was the FBI that magically discovered Lee Harvey Oswald's palm print on a piece of that Mannlicher Carcano rifle that had already been dusted by the Dallas police without finding anything. So that's basically what these guys are up to. And when they come on in, it generally signals that there is something that needs to be covered up or spun or hidden from the American public. Now, as far as TWA 800 is concerned, my article on it is still linked up at the top gray box on the page. It's about the fourth row down, right in the middle. And like I said to the Delta pilot, I have not looked at that stuff in a very, very long time. But I remember going through it in one particular area, writing an article called The Magic Wing Box, which absolutely demolishes the official version of events for TWA 800. Anyway, getting on back to immigration and globalism, there's this illegal alien, Bahina Rivera. He's an illegal alien from Mexico. And he's charged with murdering 20-year-old college student Molly Tibbetts. And he's getting ready to go to trial, and he's now requesting that jury selection for the September trial be moved to a county in Iowa with a Hispanic majority population. I guess he thinks that if the jury are Hispanic, that it will lead to him getting off. I seriously don't think so. What he did was very, very brutal. All right, Fisher Sand and Gravel Company their president and CEO, Tommy Fisher, has said the U.S. government is way overpaying for a border wall, and that for $4.31 billion, he can build the wall and incorporate paved roads and border technology plus a warranty. And so that's about half the $8 billion Trump wants to use. And we're talking about 234 miles of road for that price. And Fisher told the Washington Examiner, our whole point is to break through the government bureaucracy. If they do the small procurements as they are now, that's not going to cut it. Yeah, because they build a little section of fence, and the illegals just come around it. Then they'll build another section of fence, and by that time, the first one's falling apart. I still want to know what happened to that money that was voted through Congress and signed into law. I think it was back in 1996 to fund 700 miles of border construction, of which only 33 miles was completed. What happened there? Getting on over to Brexit, things are getting very intense there. The head of the German Federation of Industries has claimed the British are lost and has thrown doubt on Berlin's backing for a short Brexit extension, claiming that an economy can live better with bad conditions than with uncertainty. Everybody's tired of waiting. So Dieter Kempf, the chairman of the Bundesverbandes der Deutschen Industrie, said the 100,000 companies he represents and their 8 million employees have prepared for a no-deal scenario in March, not in May. They just want to move ahead and get it done with and deal with the aftermath here. Up in Oslo, Norway, survey up there is showing that 70% of violent crime in Oslo is being committed by the migrants. And apparently it's a huge problem up there. So how's that open border thing working out for you? Back in Great Britain, a cross-party committee of members of parliament has demanded, we demand, do you hear? We demand that Britain double the number of refugees imported directly from the Third World and to expand the working rights of asylum seekers. Now, in a report published yesterday, the International Development Committee argued that both moves would see Britain set a good example, policy-wise, to governments in sub-Saharan Africa. And he's saying basically, Stephen Twigg, who's chairman of the committee, said it's important that Great Britain behaves at home as it is asking some of the world's poorest nations to do. Well, this is just more of pushing for that globalism. And with Brexit about to happen, I think Soros is really going to hit the gas pedal. And just, we're seeing it at our southern border. They just cram, get the refugees, get the illegal immigrants, destroy the national borders as quickly as we can. Macron is attacking Brexit, understandably. He's a globalist. And apparently he made a direct address to the over 500 million people who live in the European Union, calling on them to support his vision of a more centralized and powerful project, European Union, which he believes could even entice the United Kingdom into canceling Brexit. Talk about desperation on the cusp of madness. So they're coming up on elections there, and it's going to be all over the place. But I don't think the people of Europe want a strengthening of Brussels, because Brussels has been just ridiculous in the regulations they hand down. I mean, how food has to be stacked in the supermarket, things like that, things that local people should really decide for themselves. That's what gives local markets character. They decide for themselves how they're going to set it up. Brussels wants to turn the European Union into a single, static, everything looks the same. Okay. All right. Here in the United States, the government has been tracking the cause of deaths since 1999. And apparently, suicides, alcohol, and drug-related deaths have skyrocketed to record levels. And this is all being caused by feelings of hopelessness and despair. They're overwhelming many in the U.S., so much so that people are turning to alcohol, drugs, and suicide. And that tells you what's really going on in this country. Okay. Over in Canada, they're really getting into transgender extremism. You're going to like this one. There was a father in British Columbia, and he was concerned that his 13-year-old daughter had somehow decided she wanted to be a boy. And counselors at the school had encouraged the girl to start taking testosterone so she could begin to develop a more masculine appearance. Now, the father expressed concerns. Apparently, the mother was okay with it, although why they weren't both simply horrified is a mystery. We're talking a 13-year-old girl. But apparently, the Supreme Court of British Columbia stepped on in and issued a ruling in favor of the child and imposing restrictions on the parents. So we're losing our parenting rights. Over 600 students were pulled out of classes by furious parents. And again, why are we teaching these kids LGBT lifestyles? How's that going to get them a job? All right, we're going to take a phone call now from Mark in Montana. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, Michael. Kind of wanted to talk about this India-Pakistan thing and how really sensitive and dangerous this is. I don't think it's getting enough coverage out there.
I would agree.
Actually, it's kind of it's kind of interesting. Right up the road, I got a little Quickie Mart type thing, and one half of it's a Quickie Mart, and the other half is a liquor store. And the liquor store is actually owned by the Muslim guy, and he sells liquor, which I'm sure his wife is not happy about. And the little Quickie Mart is owned by the Indian guy, and they get along fine. There's no tensions there. But I talked to them, and they're concerned. This has been going on for 60 years, 70 years, something like that.
Oh, the hatred between the Muslims and the Hindus goes back centuries. And
well, yeah, but Pakistan used to be part of India. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of that.
Well, yeah, that's what Gandhi did. They got the British to leave. Then they because of the enmity between the Hindus and Muslims, they had to split India into two pieces: India as we know it today, and Pakistan. And then ultimately, Pakistan split in two again to give us Bangladesh.
Well, yes, and there's also that disputed area there, and that's what this whole thing is about. I can't even remember the name of it. I'm sorry, I'm having a brain fart. The area between India and Pakistan, which is the disputed area, neither of them seems to know whose it is, and they won't give them independence. And that's both my Hindu friend and the Hindu friend is actually a Catholic, but my Indian friend and my Muslim friend both say all they got to do is give that independence to that area and let them be self-governing, and it would solve the problem.
Yeah, it would solve the problem, but India does not want to allow the referendum. And, I mean, that could be where World War III really starts for real.
Yeah.
Because both India and Pakistan have nuclear weapons.
Right. And these guys were, they were talking real serious that they were kind of scared for their families over there. I know the Pakis are really pounding India hard with artillery, and they killed some people and they've done some damage. So they're pounding each other pretty hard. The problem is like you said, they've got nukes, and when you're dealing with the most, I believe India is still the most populous country on the face of the earth. That could be a lot of death.
I think it's the 5th most populous. Anyway, listen, we got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and the phone lines are open. 800-313-9443. Excuse me there a second. We're talking about things that are out there in liberal la-la land, and tennis legend Martina Navratilova is being attacked for saying it's not fair for biologically female athletes to have to compete against biological males. And she's standing her ground. She's not backing down. She's been called a Nazi. And it really is just crazy out there. Over in Great Britain, they've set up their first transgender prison wing, which will be for men who identify as women. Apparently they had some problems with biological men saying that they were women being put in the women's prison, and whoopsie, there were some assaults and attacks here. So now they've got a dedicated prison wing just for men who identify as women. Okay. Now, this is an important case. Over in Alabama, a court has become the first court in the nation to recognize an aborted baby as a person with rights. This was happening in Madison County, and the case basically involved that the father wanted the baby. I know that feeling. And he wanted to sue the women's center that performed the abortion, as well as the employees and the pharmaceutical company that made the medication used in the abortion. So on February 10th, 2017, against his wishes, the girlfriend of Ryan Magers aborted the baby they had conceived. In early February of this year, Magers filed suit. The suit states that the baby was aborted at 6 weeks in 2017. And so basically the court said that, yeah, an aborted baby is a human being with rights, and the father is the executor of its will, of its estate, which gives him standing to sue. Now, it's a little convoluted, but I think when it comes down to the question about whether a baby that survives an abortion is a person with rights, this is going to be cited as a precedent. Very interesting story that came on out of Aletho News. Apparently, they're still digging around this whole Skripal case. And apparently, there have been some leaks of information coming out from the hospital where the Skripals were treated. And the rumors are basically saying that they were actually poisoned by fentanyl. Now, was this a deliberate hit? Were they being killed in order to make them into anti-Russia migrants? Were they themselves indulging? But apparently, people are starting to talk. All right, we're going to take a break here for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Over at the FDA, there, Scott Gottlieb is stepping down, effective next month, and basically came up saying he was leaving to spend more time with his family, which very often is a cover for something else when went down. And no replacement has been announced yet. But the FDA has not really been doing a good job for the American people. Whether his replacement will be any better, time will solve that mystery. We have been talking a lot about the measles vaccine and how every time a class gets the mandatory vaccination, it's followed by an outbreak. And people couldn't figure out what was going on. But there is a paper that was just published in the Journal of Clinical Microbiology entitled Rapid Identification of Measles Virus Vaccine Genotype by Real-Time PCR. And it's discovered something that the pro-vaxxers don't want you to know. As it turns out, a large number of measles outbreaks are actually reactions to the measles vaccine itself. You get injected with the vaccine, you come down with a measles-like disease. So it is just a huge, huge mess. Now, the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons were testifying, or actually issued a statement to a Senate subcommittee and saying they strongly oppose mandatory vaccination. It should be our right to decide. And this idea of the government coming on in and saying, well, we think you're a hazard to those around you. Again, there have been like 100 people have died from the measles vaccination, and only a few that have died from measles itself. The last one was a lady in Washington State, and she just got the vaccine. So let's talk about human-caused global warming, because we are getting into March, and it's still coming down out there, and it's still getting colder. In fact, I was looking at the long-range temperature forecaster right here on Oahu, and it's going to be cooler by the weekend. So I don't know what's going on. But I'd like a little of that tropical sun to be coming on through right now. So, Corson County, and this is coming out of Kiloland. Basically, drivers and plows are dealing with the drifting snow. And they've been running into drifting snows as they've gotten behind the wheel. And it was definitely the case Monday night in Corson County. The Corson County Sheriff's Office posted a video on Facebook of Highway 12 west of McIntosh. The drifts were already stretching into the lane, and the wind was whipping the snow across the road here. A new cold blast has moved into the New York area, and temperatures will remain unseasonably cold over the next few days, meaning it's colder than it normally is this time of year, even though it's just March. Over in Westchester County, wet, heavy snow blankets Westchester, and they were showing this photo of a little loader trying to deal with the snow, and the snow is so heavy and so wet, the loader literally upended onto its scoop. So it's very heavy out there. Now, some people are having fun. Up in Canada, gentleman named Clint Mass decided he was going to use this empty field to build the world's largest snow maze. It took 12 workers 3 weeks to build it. They were working in minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures. And the maze measures at a staggering 2 million square meters. And the Guinness World Records visited Manitoba and said, yeah, this eclipsed the previous record by over 1,000 square feet. And apparently Mass likes to do this. He's been crafting corn mazes on his farm in St. Adolphe for 2 decades. But after a difficult harvest last year, the father of 2 came up with this unorthodox idea to turn his family's fortunes around. So they got that built. They're in the Guinness Book, and I imagine they're going to get a little tourism traffic, because who wouldn't want to see the world's largest snow maze? I remember when we first moved here to Oahu, and up in the middle of the island is the Dole Plantation, where they're growing some of the pineapples, and of course there's a little tourist souvenir store, little diner you can get things, and in the middle of all of it was a maze, a garden maze. And when we first showed here, if you could get to the center of the maze and back out, and there was a little ticket you would get at the center of the maze, you would win a prize. Well, with the advent of Google Earth, of course, the prizes went away, but the maze is still there. Let's talk a little bit about computers here. After we do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. There is a new piece of malware out there. It's called Triton. And the code is designed to disable safety systems on places like refineries, nuclear reactors. It was first discovered in the Middle East, but apparently the hackers behind it are now targeting companies in North America and other parts of the world as well. And this stuff is very nasty. It basically attacks these digital automated controllers. And part of the problem is that industrial plants are going through their Internet of Things transition, where everything is being hooked to everything else. And of course, that creates more vulnerabilities for the hackers. But this is the first time that they've seen malware that is actually designed to kill and injure people. And one wonders what it's going to be used for. Is it going to be used for extortion? Or is it a military weapon being developed and tested around the world? It is a bit of a mess. All right, Edison Research is saying that all the bad press about Facebook seems to be catching up to the company. New numbers from Edison Research show an estimated 15 million fewer users in the United States compared with 2017. The biggest drop was in that very desirable 12 to 34-year-old demographic, which has the most disposable income and the most energy to go on out and buy things. Marketplace Tech got a first look at Edison's latest social media research. It revealed almost 80% of people in the U.S. are posting, tweeting, or snapping, but fewer are going to Facebook. I haven't used Facebook since last year. Okay, here's a story for those of you who are concerned about your hair color. This is from Natural News. Apparently, there is new evidence that hair dyes increase the chance of women having breast cancer. This is from Finland. And for her doctoral dissertation, researcher Sanna Heikkinen, yes, of the University of Helsinki and the Finnish Cancer Registry examined self-reported information from 8,000 Finnish women with breast cancer and a further 20,000 controls. Heikkinen observed a 23% increase in breast cancer risk for those who dyed their hair on a regular basis. So, alrighty, well, I could use some phone calls because I have actually run out of the talking points today here. And let's see what somebody is sending to me. Oh, this is the guy who was on TWA 800. Okay. Message has been disinfected. But have you gotten sick and tired of all the scammers that are just out there? That was a scam call I got when I was on the air. And it really is annoying. And one of the problems that we're having right now is there is so much there is so much junk email, spoofing, and nobody's doing anything about it. So they're starting to modify the email systems with something called DMARC. And there's two other little systems that go with it. And the idea is you have to add these special records to your DNS record so that mail servers who are equipped for this system are more easily able to spot spoofed email addresses. But it means that your actual reply to address and your from address have to be the same, or you get tagged and thrown on out. And it's just making it harder and harder for ordinary people to do their work. And that's what Claire was dealing with earlier today. Because apparently one of the Yahoo mail service providers is misconfigured. Remember I said earlier in the show I'm getting this strange error message, and I did a web search on it, and they said, bogus MX records. So, okay, let's go on back here, see if we've got anything to talk about. Alrighty, apparently Alex Trebek just tweeted out he has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. You probably remember him, game show host. I think, if I recall correctly, he was even in Roger and Me by Michael Moore here. The Department of Homeland Security Secretary is saying illegal immigration is spiraling out of control. Warns it will get even worse. He's saying this is not a manufactured crisis. This is truly an emergency. And apparently ICE is now giving pregnancy tests to all girls over 9 years old. There are now 200 cases of mumps in the Texas Detention Center. This is a bad policy. And it's being driven, first of all, by the globalists and by the Democrats, who are just absolutely wanting to crowd as many illegal immigrant voters into this country by 2020 as they can. Nobody's playing by the rules anymore. All right, over in Japan, the narrative regarding the HPV vaccine is coming apart because apparently their version of the shot causes long-term pain. But the pharmaceutical corporation is saying, oh, it's just psychosomatic. It's in their head. There's really nothing there. We had that article, I think it was just yesterday, where people getting the HPV shot are showing rising rates of infertility. Oh, thank goodness we have ourselves a caller on the line. Charlie in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Rush Limbaugh's on my mind.
Okay.
Today was pretty interesting. He was telling his audience that Donald Trump can stop immigration anytime he wants through Title VIII. And it's like his whole audience was like shocked.
Well, Rush is right. The Russia's
I know, but
absolutely
I mean,
right.
it's been 2 years into this. It's been 2 years into this, and people like that listen to RBN or whatever. We all know that. But I mean, here's this sophisticated business-owned audience. Like 2 or 3 people called in, and they were like, "What the hell do we vote for?" Anyways, so I just wanted to call in to let you know that I think he's going to stir up. I think he's stirring up trouble. He's very coming in through the back door because his audience is going to think this is going to be discussed. Why is Trump, sitting around when he could stop immigration anytime he wants? And then he's telling everybody we need more people from other parts of the world. We need merited immigration.
Yeah, and
Russia's been talking about stopping.
Yeah,
Russia's been talking about stopping immigration. That's what he's been talking about. That we need to stop all immigration.
We'll
see how far he goes with it.
I absolutely agree.
I mean, the people coming across the border don't hold a candle to the people from China or India or Haiti or the Balk. I mean, the bulk of the immigration right now for the last number of years is coming from Asia and India and other parts of the world. The Mexicans are already here, people. There's not a whole lot of room left for the Mexicans. There's enough people here, but they want the higher level of cheap labor coming from India for the computer industry. The Chinese, when they get here, they work 2 jobs, buy a house, and they rent it back to you. Okay, well, thanks for taking my call.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot. My concern is that Donald Trump may not be doing his homework as president, and that he may actually be believing what he's seeing on TV or what he's being told by his advisors in terms of legal immigration. He may actually believe that we only have 3% unemployment. That's absolutely not true. The Bureau of Labor Statistics basically takes the people who've been out of work for months, if not years, and puts them in a separate category. So that 3% number they come up with, that's just the people who lost their jobs in the last 2 weeks. And it's a very deceptive number because even CNN reported there are almost 100 million chronically unemployed American citizens, and we should be working on finding jobs for them, not bringing in these H-1B visas to load up these high-tech corporations. And again, yes, these people are willing to work for less than Americans, although I imagine after being out of work for a year, most Americans would accept any kind of a decent salary. The other part, of course, is the failure of our education system, because the kids who are coming out of our high schools and even college, they are far behind these kids who are educated in these other countries like China and Asia. All right, we have more callers on the line. Chris in Cleveland, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing fine.
I heard the FBI topic come up a little earlier. I just called briefly to see what you knew about the origin of the FBI.
Well, originally, as I understand it, it was just an investigative agency, and when J. Edgar Hoover took it on over, he immediately started enlarging its influence and its power until finally he was able to turn it into its own separate law enforcement agency. But they weren't law enforcement to begin with. They were just investigators. Their job was to help the local police.
Like at the very beginning in like the late 1910s, I think is when that was.
Yes.
When it was an but then I think it was kind of years ago. I remember looking up the history of this on their website, which I don't think they totally got into what it was converted into, but I think effectually, I think the Pinkertons had something to do with it back in the old days.
Yes.
Familiar with them at all, but I think somewhere in the 20s, this is like Anslinger and all those crazy guys. I think somehow it got converted to being essentially the cover for the bank, for the Federal Reserve Bank. That's their primary mission.
I don't think it's their primary mission. I mean, the reason there was an FBI to begin with, those were back in the days when criminals were driving very fast cars and they could go over a county or a state line, and the police had to stop chasing them. So there was a need for an investigative body that had jurisdiction over the entire country, and that was the justification for the FBI. I don't think the FBI's primary job is protecting the Federal Reserve, although obviously if a crime got committed there or there was some kind of a threat, I'm sure that they would show up. Mostly the FBI is about keeping watch on dissident groups, suppressing freedom of speech. And again, if you go back and you read the history of COINTELPRO, you'll see some of the things they did. The Black Panther coloring book, the staged hippie riot at Disneyland. This is the sort of things that the FBI has been doing. And it's all about perception management and giving the news media what the news media needs to trick you into going along with whatever the current government's agenda happens to be. So these days, of course, they run pretty much rampant over the entire country. And yeah, they're a modern day Gestapo. Anyway, listen, Chris, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We got another caller waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Patrick in California. Aloha, Patrick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Mike. How you doing? Enjoy the show all the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got advice for you on email. You could switch to Proton Mail or unseen.is, which is in Iceland. You got Switzerland or Iceland. It's your choice. And I've used both of them. The one in Iceland, the service went down, the servers.
Yeah.
But the one in Switzerland, we haven't had any problems. So feel free to use protonmail.com.
I was looking at Proton Mail. Here's a question. My wife uses Outlook for her email, and she's got a lot of data in there, contacts, tasks, the calendar, everything. And so can you access Proton Mail through either POP or SMTP, or is it only through a web interface?
You can use you and your wife or whoever, and whoever it is. You guys can use the same Proton Mail, and it could be encrypted. And then if you want more data, you just donate, and you just get more data. It's pretty awesome.
Okay.
Highly recommend it.
Well, I was looking at Proton Mail myself, but I think the point I was trying to make is that as our nation deteriorates, and it is clearly deteriorating, companies are cutting corners. They're not being as careful with what they're doing. And we're starting to feel it down here at the consumer level with products that don't work right out of the box, with computer problems that are just out of control, bad software, bad hardware. And it does feel like we're in a decline. And I'm one of those old-fashioned people that, when I was growing up, you'd go and you'd buy something and you'd use it, and if it broke, it was easy to repair, which is necessary when you're growing up in farming country. But these days, it just seems like corporate greed has reached a point where these CEOs really aren't concerned. They figure they can buy their way out of trouble with a good public relations campaign, or good lawyers, or as in the case with both the computer and the vaccine industries, they can get the government to protect them legally from any kind of product liability. And we do need to bring it back. We need to bring back product liability. Anyway, Patrick, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go.
Thank you. I enjoyed the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. And I know you go down someplace like a Best Buy or something, and you'll pick something up. I remember I was getting desperate, and I actually went to Best Buy to look at a new laptop. And this machine I picked up, I'm not going to name the brand, but you could already see where the case was starting to pry apart. And I pointed it out to the salesperson and said, this is really shoddy product. And they said, well, don't worry about it. You get a warranty. Like that makes it all better. I don't want a warranty. I want reliability. Because if I have to bring these things in on the warranty, especially over and over and over again, that's time out of my day. That's time that whatever this is isn't doing what it's supposed to do. And I remember when there was a time where the United States was admired and looked up to for building quality products that lasted forever. And everybody around the world wanted them. And it's not that way any longer, unfortunately. Anyway, apparently iPhone sales are falling. And apparently Apple is now positioning its booming digital services business as its new profit empire. And apparently this has led to a backlash against the rich commissions Apple earns from all purchases and subscriptions made via iPhone. And it could actually undercut the App Store, which generates about a third of the company's services revenue. Now, last year, Netflix rebelled against Apple's fees, which can range from 15% to 30%. That's a hefty shot. Analysts fear other companies may follow, and attorneys representing consumers in a pending Supreme Court case charge Apple is an unfair monopolist in the market for iPhone apps. And an adverse decision in that case could open a legal door that might eventually force Apple to cut its generous commissions and, of course, open the door to other companies to produce iPhone apps. Now, you can get alternative iPhone apps now if you jailbreak your phone, but that can lead to all kinds of security issues. When I first got my first iPhone, I jailbroke it immediately. And I could telnet into it and prowl through the file system, but I'm a little past that kind of thing right now. I haven't even had time to play with my Raspberry Pi, my little Linux box here. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break, and we'll be back after these few words. Big fan of astronomy. I built my first telescope in junior high. And, of course, we have pretty good skies out here in Hawaii, along with one of the world's finest observatories. And they're still going back and forth over the 30-meter telescope. And I hope they go ahead and build it up there. And I certainly plan on visiting it if the volcano isn't yapping all over everything. Up on Mars, the InSight rover has had to have its it's designed to dig up to 16 feet into actually making any progress. And subsequent analysis suggested the mole, which is just surface. And they're saying it got maybe a depth of between 7 and 20 inches after 4,000 hammer blows. Just looking at the photos of the surface, you can see so they're going to shut the mole down and try and assess what they can do. They're under some serious constraints. That lander can't move. It's not. I don't think it's really able to relocate the drill. Okay, that's interesting. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Jim in New York. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. How are you today?
Fine.
You know, I see this every day in the paper, Alexandria Cortez, and it's like even a lot of sites I used to like, it seems like they obsess over this woman. I mean, she's just a freshman congresswoman. She has limited power.
Yes.
I think it's, I find a lot of the alt-right sites that they're wasting their time. If they want to worry, they should be worried about these neocons around Trump, like Mike Pence, John Bolton, Pompeo. These people are dangerous, but it seems like
darling of the Democratic Party, and she certainly has presence. And she obviously represents a certain group of people and an agenda who are going to be promoting her in order to promote their own interests. But I think she may be self-destructing and going down in flames over this dark money scandal, along with the fact that some of the things that she's come up with, like the Green New Deal, it sounds really good on a TV interview, but it is ultimately unworkable.
Oh, yes, that won't get passed, but I would just ignore her. I mean, I don't think she's got any real power, and the same with Omar, the congresswoman, or they're really going after her.
Yeah, they are, and she's standing firm, and I think that's a good thing for her to do.
Well, I think she's almost like a lightning rod.
She's the Democratic version of Sarah Palin.
Yes, that's all I wanted to say. Have a great show, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Yeah, we're getting this image that Trump is easy to manipulate. We had that article earlier today where Bolton apparently is just ramrodding his idea of a foreign policy past Trump, and we don't know, what Pence is doing, or what Elliott Abrams are doing, but it's very obvious that the government has decided the only way out of the economic mess they're in is a really decent war, and unfortunately, I think they're going to lose it. Anyway, we're talking about the InSight lander, and I had to do a little check there online because I thought it was a lander. It sets down, it can't move, but over at the Express, they described it as a rover, but it isn't. They didn't check their facts on that. So they're not going to be able to relocate that mole anywhere. And again, looking at all the rocks that are visible in that image of the surface, there's going to be rock down there. And I think maybe whoever engineered the mole may have gone a different way. I know they want to get down to 16 feet into the ground. I think they should have gone with a scoop like we had on Viking. And called Dave in Chicago. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello there, Mike. This is Dave. And basically, I was just calling up to add to your conversation regarding cyber. And we've actually, through Kaspersky, they actually come back to websites and generated from government agencies like CIA and stuff of that nature. And we've also found that a lot of corporations that support these types of, they're kind of feeding the kitty to make us pay for a self-defense that is caused by them.
Well, it's a protection racket. You got a nice computer there. Be terrible if something bad happened to it. So you got to buy our protection. You got to buy our protection. It's a protection racket.
Right. Exactly. The basic route, is to buy more product that basically on 0 day, it does no good. So it's defeated right there, and then all the engineers are scrambling to find a cure.
Yes. I heard somewhere that a 0 day exploit sells on the dark web for as much as $250,000 now.
Oh, I believe that.
Yeah.
I believe that. Because anybody that could do it, the quickest analysis, all the engineers try to feed off of it and try to find the patch. So I totally agree with that.
Yep. It is a jungle out there.
Oh, yes, it is. And you know what? We're part of the prey, and that's the problem. So I just wanted to throw my 2 cents into the cybercrime thing that you were speaking of earlier. Sorry to change your subject, and have a great day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open. And, yeah, I mean, ever since home computers came around, well, even before that, people were just playing on the net, on the Unix machines, just seeing if they could get them to do bad things. And yes, they can. And now of course, it's big business. We're not dealing with, a bunch of kids in their parents' basement with a script generator. We're dealing with well-organized and well-funded criminal enterprises. Okay, getting on back to space, NASA had a little bit of good news. Actually, this was back in December, but I didn't report it back then. NASA's OSIRIS-REx spacecraft arrived at the asteroid Bennu, and amazingly enough, they have discovered water. When they ran the thermal emissions spectrometer, it revealed the presence of water molecules which contained oxygen and hydrogen atoms bonded together, known as hydroxyls. So they're starting to find a lot more water out there than they thought. Meanwhile, New Horizons apparently is now heading toward yet another Kuiper Belt object and is basically going to be again, making more history out there. NASA is continuing to talk about a colony on the moon, and they're basing it on two bombshell discoveries. One is the fact that of the ice inside the moon's darkest craters, meaning there is a supply of water there that they can live on. And the other discovery apparently is the ion engine, which it's not as thunderous and impressive as the F-1s, but apparently can get you to the moon a lot quicker. All right, we're going to take another phone call. This is Mark in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I'd like to bring up one series, and I'm just going to touch on it, the series called Europa, The Last Battle. I encourage everybody to look it up on YouTube if you haven't watched it yourself, Michael. It's incredibly revealing about communism, Bolshevism, Zionism, whatever you want to call it. They're all the same, basically. I encourage people to watch it. If you had to buy it, it's like $150 if you bought the DVD series. But it's free on YouTube. It's 10 parts, and it's over 10 hours, but it's very well worth watching and actually studying. I'm on my second turn of watching it. So there's another one that I just discovered, and I'm not into watching movies necessarily for entertainment. I like to watch true-to-life stuff.
Yes.
This is a Russian production, and it's on Netflix, and it's called Trotsky. Okay? And I didn't really know. I know Trotsky was elemental in the stir there with communism, but I didn't know very many details. Well, this series brings out some details, and it also brings out Lenin and then Koba, who is Stalin.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, when you watch it, there's a lot of people going along with this stuff, right, and following these guys, and then they start finding out that these guys are, they don't care about anybody but themselves, and they don't care about life. And I have to wonder, though. I started wondering. I said, well, did anybody surrounding these guys just think that they're crazy, they're maniacs, they're evil, and just somebody ought to just, they need to take them out. But for some reason, people hesitated to take these guys out. They're just, evil. They're just evil. And so my sense of it, what's going on in our nation is the destruction of distinctions, the destruction of principles, the destruction of what's good. And so they have us distracted. They have us dissenting with each other. They have us confused, distracted, frustrated. They keep us in a ever-present moment of fear, and we got to stop buying into it, because they don't want us to think. They don't want us to think and feel what's real and what's good. They want to destroy distinctions of good.
Yep.
And little by little, they're accomplishing it. And anybody that goes along with it, they better wake up. Really, they're maniacs. They're evil maniacs. They're not about life. They're not about respecting life. They're just evil. That's it. So that's my sense of it. But anyway, those two series, Europa, The Last Battle, is incredibly revealing about what's been developing over the last 100 years plus in terms of communism, Bolshevism, and all this. And it also reveals some distinctions about Hitler, about what National Socialism was supposed to be about, what he defined it to be. And anyway, it's just very revealing, and I think people ought to, take the time to learn some real facts of history, because we've been lied to so long.
Oh yes,
and it's very upsetting. We've been lied to so long. How do we know real from not real? We weren't there. We weren't there in history, and they're glad that the older folks are dying off, because then we don't have any reference to real history, and they can rewrite our history and then totally lie to us. And these young people coming up, they have no reference to real history, you see, and they're being propagandized into in conditions from the young age to believe in stuff that isn't real and isn't valid. It doesn't last. And so anyway, I'll leave it at that. So thank you, Michael,
all right,
for being
Mark,
there.
thanks an awful lot there. History is written by the victors. It's basically a big joke they play on the vanquished, and everybody else sits around too scared to laugh. If you go and you study history deeply, and we're talking college level, you find out that what you were taught in elementary school, grade school, was really a load of nonsense. I remember learning one time the story about George Washington and the cherry tree, where he's standing there with an axe in his hand saying, "Well, I cannot tell a lie." That was actually a campaign propaganda. The actual incident never happened. They just made it up. It's more political campaigning. And again, political power attracting people who shouldn't have it. There are dark sides to many of the founding fathers. And as Layla was saying, the few morally honest presidents we've had all seem to be shot at. And again, I think this country is in serious, serious trouble. We're looking at an economic crash. We're looking at these wars spinning out of control. And what really bothers me is I'm not seeing any indication of a sense of caution or concern about the war agenda. Everybody in Washington, D.C. is still thriving on that "we've never lost a war" mindset, that we will prevail, victory or death, except that we never won in Korea and we never won in Vietnam. And we're getting kicked out of Syria. We're getting ready to leave Afghanistan. We're going to claim that we won in Afghanistan, but we didn't. All right, got to take another break for a commercial. Back with the last segment of our show today after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Last segment of our show today. Boy, I'm really tired by the time we get to the end of this thing. And a few stories here to finish up. Speaking of proton mail, which we had a caller call on into it, apparently there is a recent variant of the Guaranteed Decrypt ransomware, and it's been found that it pretends to be from the security team for Proton Technologies, which is the company behind Proton Mail and Proton VPN. And the ransomware family was found by ransomware researcher Michael Gillespie in October of last year. And while it has never achieved a large-scale distribution like other ransomware, it has seen a steady trickle of victims since it has been released. So it is a jungle out there. And I'm going to share with you some common sense things. Don't do your banking over your electronic device. The only time we will have our electronic device talk to the bank, it's a desktop computer, to see what the current balance is, what checks have come in. We don't have it configured to transfer any money. You got to start taking back your life from the cyber criminals and understand your smartphone, your tablet, your laptop, they are being used against you. And you have to sort of develop this foxhole mentality of saying, is the benefit of making my data available on this machine, does it outweigh the risk? Most times you're probably going to say, no, it really doesn't here. Interesting little story. Apparently, scientists switched off a gene in the roundworm and discovered that the lifespan of the roundworm doubled. So already, I'm sure the money junkies are out there saying, "Oh, snip my gene, snip my gene." Apparently, heart patients taking statins face a higher risk of type 2 diabetes, as study adds further fuel to scientific row over the cholesterol-busting drugs. And statins brought to market, approved for use, marketed like crazy, turned out to not be as good as they were supposed to be. And now we're finding out they give you a higher risk of type 2 diabetes. My youngest brother was on statins. He'd suffered a stroke, and the doctor said, we're going to put you on statins. And the problem with statins, it doesn't dissolve the cholesterol from your blood vessels slowly. It can, in many cases, cause a big chunk to fall off and get into some place it shouldn't be. And that appears to be what happened with my youngest brother. And anyway, so this week we're seeing more cooling around the planet. We're seeing these climate extremes, mostly in the cold. They've had some hot days down in Australia. But it's not your fault. That's the big lie, is that somehow you are to blame and you must atone for it with carbon taxes and obedience to a global authority. It's just another scam like so many other scams that we've seen. Saddam's nuclear weapons, Assad's sarin gas. Who knows what they'll come up with from Maduro. All right, there's the music time for me to get on out of here. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here and share it with everybody that you know. And please make a point of donating to Republic Broadcasting. They really, really, really need your help. And for that matter, so does whatreallyhappened.com. So we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.